Well, welcome everybody. We're really excited to talk to you today about a partnership that HD Reach has been working on with UNC for the last couple of months, longer than that, almost years now, right? So essentially what we're trying to do, just the headline here is, we're trying to change the way that care is delivered in North Carolina and trying to create a more distributed model of that care to cover the gaps that we have across the state. North Carolina is a really big state and we have 3 HD care centers and it's still not enough. People living in Asheville, in Boone, even in Charlotte have to drive to Vanderbilt, or they have to drive 2-3 hours to get to this part of the state to actually get HD care. So in partnership with UNC, what we're trying to do is establish a network of satellite clinics so that people can have a blended telehealth and in-person model for their care delivery. And we're excited to talk to you about it today. Dr. Testa is going to lead us through the conversation. I'll jump in occasionally, but I don't want to steal her thunder. So with that, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Anthony. So do I just tap on here?
I think so. Yeah, just the arrows. There you go.
All right, fantastic. Oh my God, I'm going to have to put my glasses on. I am getting that old. So I think that everything that we're trying to do at the UNC Huntington's Disease program, as well as everything that HD Reach is trying to do, our partnership is really centered around patients and families. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about is how, as a medical professional and coming from the UNC institutional side, how we try to hear those voices and stay aligned with that mission, but also how we work our professional position, which is connected both to patients and families and to other healthcare professionals. So this place in the middle, if you will. So this is actually one of the main reasons that I moved 2.5 years ago. I did my medical training at University of Michigan and in Boston with Ann Young and Jack Penny, who were part of the search for the Huntington's disease gene, and with that research group. And then I moved to Emory University for fellowship and my first faculty job. Emory has the first oldest HTSA Center of Excellence in the country. And so that was the team that I'm extremely lucky to have trained with. So I took that experience to Virginia Commonwealth in Richmond about, 12 years ago, and founded a new Huntington's disease group there that grew into an HDSA Center of Excellence. So when my new boss moved to UNC, I've known her for a long time through science, called and said, "Hey, I'm on the ground, when are you coming?" I was like, "Well, that's awesome and I would love to work with you, but I'm already working at a state safety net hospital. I'm already have built a new Huntington study group site. I've already built a new HTSA Center of Excellence. So I'd be very happy to just relax here and enjoy my success. Like, why will I move? You got to incentivize me to move my family and start all over again, because that was a ton of work." And she said, yeah. We're not just here for Chapel Hill. We don't just have a hospital in Chapel Hill and some clinics, within a 20-minute drive, like Virginia Commonwealth. We have a statewide network of affiliated clinics and hospitals that we're closely connected with. And part of my job as the new chair is how can we truly serve the state and the region. She's also passionate about neurogenetics. So she said, "Why don't you build a new neurogenetics program? You haven't done that before. And why don't you build a statewide network of care? Because you haven't done that before." And I ran into Mary Edmondson, some of you might know, at a work meeting shortly after that. And she said, "You are finally moving to North Carolina." Yes. Okay, first thing, you have to talk to HD Reach, because they're already a statewide network of outreach. And so that's your normal partner right there. So we think about what are our natural connections. They're going to be with families and with other care providers. So from the care side, what can we provide? It's genetic counseling expertise, genetics expertise, neurology expertise, psychiatry expertise, neuropsychology. We have 2 PhD level people who are fantastic. It's all the rehab services, PT, occupational therapy, speech. We're incredibly grateful that we have a donor-funded social worker position who's amazing and has a lot more experience in North Carolina than I do, particularly with rural communities. So now that we have the sort of central hub, then we want to go outwards into what are those clinics, whether they're UNC affiliated or not, if they're the clinic that's doing the work, what resources do they want? One of the other things I want to just really briefly touch on is that I consider our group, because I've been a long time Huntington Study Group member, been in clinical trials for a long time, we consider our clinic to be a gateway to clinical trials. And I am place neutral. You know, if Duke's doing the trial, if Georgetown is doing the trial, if someplace in Florida is the only site because there's mostly sites in Europe and 5 sites in the US, I don't care. Right? we can get people there. But if we have our patients' permission to have research coordinators contact them, I'll put that in my notes, or we'll keep a running list of people who just say, it's okay to contact me about research. And then I know it's okay. I know it's okay to give that name or that email or that phone number to a research coordinator and have them get people connected. So I don't feel like we have to say, we're the place where you can do clinical trials, or we're the place where you can come to do clinical trials. We certainly are, and we want to be that place. But we're the gateway to all trials to help you get to wherever they are. So let's talk a little more about care. So I think this is more on the HD Reach side, where we're now working with you guys to say, where families, where people, what are the family voices saying that they want from care communities or from medical professionals. So you want to talk a little bit about how we're sort of getting from families through you guys to us.
Yeah, and you can see up here, these are just a few examples of the types of people that are part of this community. The HD community is incredibly diverse, not only geographically distributed, but we're all coming to the table at different points of our journey, and we really need to be thoughtful about what that journey looks like and how can we tailor services, support, and care to that individual at every step along the way. You can imagine you start as maybe a child, maybe you don't know that Huntington's is in your family, maybe you know you're at risk. Eventually you get tested, eventually maybe you're pre-symptomatic, maybe you're symptomatic, eventually, you know, there's such a wide range of things that you're going to go through that entire time. So one of the things that we're really trying to do is tailor the way that we talk about ourselves to the individual personas that are part of our community. So for example, if you're at risk, new to HD, et cetera, you know, we want to get information out to the communities and then activate those communities with that information, because we can't go out there and talk to everybody. And honestly, that's kind of what it takes to identify new people with Huntington's disease, especially if they don't know that Huntington's disease is in their families. We've also, as we talked about during the panel earlier, we recognize that there's a lot of fear in this community, right? People don't want to be discovered. And often it's when they're facing crisis that they realize that they have no other option. So our community activation approach is really predicated on engaging with people whom the community would trust, right? Clergy at local churches, for example, the guidance counselors at a school that's nearby, first responders, police officers. You know, we really want to get this information out there because we know that we're not getting to all HD patients. There was a study that was commissioned a few years ago, we were just talking about it, and I think, if I remember correctly, it said that 70% of HD patients or people affected by HD are invisible to us. We can't find them. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And what we think is this leveraged model of community activation will put the tools in the hands of people whom the community trusts that can then recommend that they come to us with their needs. And then HD Reach can provide that care navigation and funnel them back into, you know, places like UNC for that care.
So I just want to kind of go back, wrong direction. So if you look at the map, we're working with literally identifying clinics that are this far away from home base, right? So when we say we're trying to target areas for satellites, this is kind of the map that I try to keep in my head. So in terms of connecting the network of medical professionals, so when HD Reach or HD Genetics or some other group, HCSA, a local support group comes to Latorius or comes, or Wes, our nurse navigator, or comes to me and says, there's a clinic, we're seeing somebody, but we don't want to leave them, but we need more than what they have. Medical professionals are quite human. You might have noticed that we're not all completely awesome all of the time, and we don't all know everything about everything. But the vast majority of medical professionals that I've met want to do a good job. They want to do a good job caring for a family impacted by HD. They want to at least try. And so sometimes what they have is a lack of knowledge. Sometimes no amount of knowledge is going to be okay because they're not a trained psychiatrist and they're not going to magically turn into one, no matter how much they know about HD. Sometimes it's just a lack of resources. They don't have anyone in their group who's a genetic counselor or who's comfortable with doing that kind of counseling work. So our job is to talk with them and say, what really works for you guys? We know you want to do a good job. We know that you're engaged with the family. We know that you're trying to figure out what does good job look like for you. For some practices, I can think of one that's a solo neurologist that I used to work with in rural Virginia. What good looked like for them was, can you please find a way to see my patients? Because I'm just one person and I can't do the best job at care for every rare disease, that's out there. And so how can I get you my patients? That's not common, but if that's out there, then we want to figure out how that's going to be feasible. HD Reach got a gas card for a patient for us recently who didn't have a neurologist that was any closer than us and wanted to see a neurologist. So how can we get people to us when that is what good care looks like for them and for their community providers? Some places just want a little more support. Like a solid general neurologist will often say, okay, I'm going to send my person to you once a year, once every couple of years, or whenever the two of us have a question. Between the two of us, we agree that we are not making progress. Time for the subspecialty consult. Send back the plan, and we got it from there. That's a great model, and especially now that telehealth video is still billable, that's also a really tractable model for the state. Sometimes there's very specific questions. We have somebody in our panel who really only trusts his local psychiatrist. I'm grateful he has a local psychiatrist, and he's going to them. Doesn't want to see anybody else though. And so we got Dr. Edmondson chatting with the local psychiatrist who hasn't taken care of HD before, so that they have a professional that they can talk to and still maintain that that's what good care looks like. We may never see this patient, but we're getting that good care to them. And then, of course, we do professional education sessions, whether that's in person or connecting people with CME for HD, which runs through Huntington Study Group. At the Virginia Commonwealth Center, we had built up enough time. I trained the therapist, and then they started training the home health therapists, once they felt comfortable with that. So that might be what good care looks like for those groups. Some groups want to and need to be the medical home for their patients, but still need stuff from the centers. So UNC Pardee Neurology, which is in Hendersonville and Afton outside of Asheville, has been an amazing partnership for us. They have built up a multi-pronged system. We can do what's called e-consults because they're an affiliate clinic where they just type us a question and we look at the medical record and we might talk to them a little bit and then we answer the question. They have a telehealth video rig that they've put in a room that's not a regular clinic room in their clinic because they can't afford to lose a billable clinic room and that time because that's just not financially feasible for them. But they found a spot where if we telehealth video into their clinic, we can bill for that. So that works for my boss. They're getting people in for care at their care home for those subspecialty consults. A lot of these patients don't have stable video capabilities in their homes. They're out in the rural mountains. They don't really want to drive to Charlottesville. They wouldn't really drive to Chapel Hill anyway. So we're both us for Huntington's disease, but also for neurogenetics, for deep brain stimulation consults, for other things. We're building up this little cadre of patients where their care home is with Pardee Neurology, but we can do these in-clinic telehealth visits, which are just fantastic. The person can get their blood drawn after the genetic counselor talks to them. Boom, they're right there, you know. Or we can talk to the nurse practitioner, you know, just right there in the visit because they have a question about the medication orders. So I'm really excited that this model has been working now. We piloted it just with this one clinic, and then we're partnering with HD Reach to say, you know, logically you'd want like the clinics scattered around the state, but also maybe you would want to try to find people who are interested in being one of these local care home clinics, one of the satellites that are located where there's a concentration of people coming to HD Reach and saying, so what, you know, selfishly I'm hoping to get out of meetings like this one is that families can tell us, hey, we love our primary care provider, or we have a fantastic local psychologist, or we have a great local general neurologist, but they are just at sea. They just don't know how to deal with cognitive symptoms. They don't have a genetic counselor that my family can talk to, but we like them generally, you know. So where are those partners who great care for your family might look like they're going to have to access HD related services through a center, or great care for your family member might look like they just get a couple specific questions answered and off you go. Or great care might be, hey, I think these guys would be a great local care home. They can totally do it. Have you talked to them yet? Because you should, because they have that capacity.
Yep. And Dr. Testa made a really excellent point. The most exciting, at least for me, the most exciting part of this program is that this is agnostic to Huntington's disease and it's agnostic to the HD organization. So, you know, we can take this and we can deploy it in South Carolina with Dr. Caterer out of USC. We can take this and we can launch it in other parts of the country which don't have any coverage from a care facility or center of excellence perspective. We can also take this and go partner with the ALS Foundation or Alzheimer's organizations or any neurodegenerative disease or rare disease. This program can help us figure out the bugs, work it out here in North Carolina as our proving ground, and then rip and replace and drop it in other parts of the of the care continuum. And one observation that I've made, you know, working very closely with nonprofits like HDSA, like HD Reach, is that marketing is really, really hard. I work with a lot of companies that are significantly larger than HDSA. So I think HDSA annual fundraising revenues are about $12 to $15 million, right? I work with companies that are bigger, but arguably still small, 50 million in annual revenues, 100 million, 200 million, and they are terrible at marketing, and they're huge compared to who we are, right? So one of the things that we're trying to do is professionalize our approach to marketing and create sort of a funnelized approach, right? How do we raise awareness at the top of the funnel? tailor the information based on those personas so that when those people get that information, they know where to come. And then we can slowly work them down that funnel and actually bring them on as an engaged individual. Maybe they're not a patient or a client, but still pull them into the organization in some way. And I think if we can get that right, the marketing piece is how we raise awareness. The community activation piece is how we raise awareness. And like I said when we started, 70% of the community is invisible to us. So we have to figure out a way to get to those people because they're just not getting the care that they need.
Yeah, and we're really thinking along the same lines from a healthcare professional standpoint. And I keep saying healthcare professional standpoint as a physician standpoint because really I'm used to interdisciplinary teams and everybody can contribute at a really high level. We're really thinking about keeping care local and strengthening local care networks. A lot of time we talk about suboptimal care, or we talk about gaps in care, or we talk about what things a community doesn't have. And what we're trying to think about with strengthening local care networks and keeping care local is what does that look like to each local community and local clinic. We want to hear not just about the bad experiences which we need to know about and help fix, but also the positive experience where you're like, this is great. It just doesn't have all the things that are in an HD interdisciplinary clinic, but it has this thing that's good that we could build off of to find the way that keeps care local and strengthens that local network in place without letting go of the level of excellence in care and the level of knowledge that so when we go out, when my institution goes out, the usual marketing is send everybody to UNC to Chapel Hill, and that's terrible because who wants to tell their patients to drive 5 hours to Chapel Hill? So to flip the script, from our end, we're doing the same thing. What does strong local care look like? What does good care that the local providers want to do look like for that community? Maybe that does mean somebody has to drive to Chapel Hill at least once. Maybe not.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, and I'd add that this is a bit of a springboard. In my experience, there are lots of small HD organizations, right? There's a huge ecosystem, and they're all siloed. They don't communicate or collaborate as effectively as they need to. They overlap in the types of services and care that they provide. And as a consequence, we end up fighting each other over the 30% of patients that we can see, and all the fundraising dollars that go to those people, or from those people.
We did have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there a question? Yes.
Two questions. We're already with the Duke neurology, and we love it. So I'm understanding that this is similar in not scope, but in terms of coverage, because we have two. But the second question, so that was my first question. Is it similar or different with Duke? And then second question, same thing with my issue with Duke. Same question is this under, how does insurance play with this? Because I'm a state health employee. I'm understanding now that, yes, Duke and UNC, you're in network, but then the state health has a smaller subset which they call clear pricing program or CPP, that if your providers are under that network, then I pay a lower copay. And I find that out that Duke nor UNC are not part of that CPP. So I pay a big chunk of out of pocket, and I'm starting to hurt. Because this is a long-term thing. So when you said that you want to make the local neurologist be an expert on this, that sounds good to me because I have a CPP neurologist who backed out of our thing because they're like, you have Duke and UNC there. So you're worth less than
So let me take the second one first, right? So this is the fourth state that I've practiced in, and there's highly variable, coverage. The laws are different. Both Virginia and North Carolina elected to not expand Medicaid immediately, for example. So I know that cost and in-network is a huge thing. So the idea is to enable people to not have to drive to Duke or drive to us, and still get the same level of care. I'm neutral. I don't have to do the driving. You want to drive to me? Great. But but I acknowledge that that is not either physically or financially feasible for a lot of people. So we don't, for UNC, we don't have to restrict our partnerships to UNC affiliates, right? We can go out and talk. We were just at Jenna Leah, the genetic counselor who works with me, and Latorius Adams, and a bunch of people were just at the North Carolina. No, wait, you didn't go that one. Too many meetings. We're just at the North Carolina Neurological Society meeting, and Jenna got a ton of traffic from practices affiliated with Novant Health, because they don't, those neurology practices don't have genetic counselor or neurogenetics access. So they were just like, how do we, we would love to come out and give us a talk, talk to our office manager. Maybe we could look at the contract you made with Part E. We're not an affiliate, but if they found a way to have their financial people be okay with it, so I think it depends on the practice. Again, some practices you're going to hear, that's great, you have Duke and UNC, I have 3,000 other patients. But there are definitely groups out there who are happy to just get a little knowledge or know that they have the backup, that you have to pay that cost and pay that drive once every couple of years or once a year instead of forever, or once you're set up and they've got their 2 questions asked from the e-consult, you're good to go. We want to find those people. That's the model, is to keep the care quality up from the professional side, give us what they need from us so that the care quality is there locally. We're obligated to make it financially sustainable, right? I can't telehealth video for free into other clinics, because then we'll go out of business and we won't take care of anybody. But that doesn't mean we can't find a way to do it locally. And then for the first thing, yeah, I've known Dr. Scott for a really long time. I am building a very similar thing, and already, I just talked with Dr. Tate. I hadn't met her in person before. I knew Frances Walker for a really long time. We're building a similar center. We have all the components. The 2 things that are different from Duke is that we don't expect patients who come in to see all the providers that day at that visit. We always have me and social work and psychiatry and genetic counseling available same day. We don't necessarily have all the other providers that same day, because I have to get that funded. The other thing that's different is that we don't have money from HDSA. So we do have neurotrained therapists, we have the neuropsychologists, we have all the people. We don't have the you come and see every single person at your center visit day model. So that's really the only difference. We are already kind of trading around. What does the one group have? What does the other group have? So that we can say, oh, you have a counselor who works with caregivers? I got 3 people who need to talk to you. Oh, we have a well-established wraparound predictive testing pathway that we guarantee we can get people into within a month of receiving the referral. We're already getting referrals from them because they don't have that. And they're just very happy that if there's something that they don't have that we're building, great. We don't have a chaplain in our visit. I think it's just amazing new pilot program at Duke. Super interested to hear about that and how that goes. So we're already talking back and forth. Everybody's got the core stuff, but there might be things even at the center level that exist in one center that don't exist in the other center. We have gotten queries from local neurology groups that are really close to Wake, and I'm just like, don't talk to us. You're half an hour from Wake. So we're constantly talking about like what makes sense. There's plenty of business out there. I don't need to suck up all the business. There's too much even for the centers that exist. So while I would like to think that we can equal or best Duke in quality and range, there's stuff that we have they don't. There's stuff that they have we don't. And the key is that we're talking back and forth and making sure that everybody's getting served.
Cool. Any other questions?
No, you hit on the point that organizations give high grade service. So you can think about it like a square. You give high grade service to 30% of the population, with 70%, underserved. That there's value in giving some grade of service to the whole 100%. There's make an argument there's almost more value in getting to everybody a little bit in the first round for at-risk or stopping the at-risk behavior that destroys families. It's better to save the 70% folks that are at risk right now than to serve the folks that have been in the program for 20 years that they're not at risk. That's the problem. The outreach has to reach the at-risk crowd, the segment, and help them a little bit. They're one bankruptcy away, they're one divorce away, they're one incarceration away, they're one whatever away.
That's a great point. And even people who are in care, they're in care at Duke, their families, all saw Francis Walker at Wake. People can change state. Their spouse gets a different job, and all of a sudden everybody's out of network, and that's not feasible. Someone gets incarcerated. Guess what? I'm seeing all the Duke incarcerated patients because Duke doesn't have contracts. They literally can't see them, and so people would disappear from care because they legally can't be seen at their old place. If somebody changes state, I think that someone goes into palliative care, home health palliative care, they're doing a great job, but they can't cover, tetrabenazine or like whatever it is, because that's not the model for that. There's a state change, and then there's a care drop-off. I think that's a place that we've been talking about, where the outreach piece can be like, oh, don't worry, don't panic. What this group doesn't know is that this other group does cover patients without insurance, or this other group does have a wraparound program for people who transition into palliative care. And so I think that's going to be an amazing resource for us working with HD Reach, is that each individual clinic doesn't have to go figure that out. Each individual clinic social worker doesn't have to know in their own head, oh my gosh, this family has to disconnect from our care. There's been a change, and then that's the end of it. We can kind of hand off to our partner and say, help us, where are the resources now?
And to your point, obviously there's a lot of effort, a lot of investment, a lot of research. We're trying to find a cure, right? But we can't wait for a cure, right? And awareness is one of the other legs of that stool, right? If everybody who was at risk knew that they were at risk and can make an informed decision about what they were going to do when they were going to have children, theoretically, we could stop Huntington's disease in this generation, right? Personally, I didn't know that I was at risk. There was a amorphous, elusive disease that all the women in my family got, and they all passed away from. My grandfather, he was a bartender. He got killed in a bar fight. He was a biker bar. He got hit in the head when he was 31 years old. So he never had any symptoms. So My mother, my aunt, my uncles, nobody knew that this was something that was going to happen to us. And it was a shock. And then I went to my physician. He had never heard of Huntington's disease. He didn't know that there was a test, right? And he didn't know how to guide me or support me in any way. So, raising awareness and just getting the information out to the community it's so important. But it's this kind of catch-22, because as we've been talking about, people don't want to be identified. They don't want to tell their story. There is material risk at telling your story if it's related to Huntington's disease. Personal example, I'm at risk. My term life insurance policy, it's the exact same as my wife's. Mine is $165 a month, and hers is $20 a month. Yep. That is a real economic impact on me. I have to be cautious about my job, right? My judgment is part of the work that I do. So I can't go around telling everybody that, hey, I might start showing symptoms right now, there's a real risk to that. So, we have to figure out a way to work together as a community to empower and elevate the people who can share their stories and feel safe doing so, and help to get that reach out to the community, because we can't waste those stories and the effort and the courage that those people put forth. Awesome. Mic drop.
Have you seen the I guess documentaries, the closest word to this unclassifiable film that Charles Sabine made?
The Huntington's dance one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But his whole thing was silent no more, to overcome that. Charles Sabine, Sabine, it's free on YouTube. I usually find it by plugging in Dancing at the Vatican Huntington disease. A whole bunch of people from the barrio in Venezuela that helped with discovering the HD gene, world famous football star, soccer star, and the Pope in person are all involved. It's very difficult to explain, but it's definitely a Charles Sabine production. He was an NBC war correspondent for a really long time. He's a Brit. He's an OBE, and he's at risk for HD, and has put a huge amount of effort into things. And his passion is this, like, removing this stigma, and making it more possible for people to feel like they can release that silence.
Yep. And there's just not enough awareness. Sorry, LaToya. There's not enough awareness of the impacts, or some of the elements of the disease. Like, we as a community tend to hide that we are at risk simply because we don't want people to think that, like, oh, I lost my temper, that must be a Huntington's disease symptom, right? Symptom hunting is so pervasive. You were going to ask a question?
I was going to piggyback off of what you said about staying connected. HD Reach and close together, and we were just discussing last week about doing in services in some of the institutions, since we get a lot of the incarcerated population.
Yep.
And when the guards come, they come with the paperwork, but they don't know anything, right? And you ask the HD patient, and sometimes you just get yes or no, and you really don't know. So here I am calling the nurse, and they don't know, or they know what they Google. So of course we send them with, like, information from Help for HD, whether they read it or not. I mean, they have so many people there. So Erica and I talked with Dr. Tess and Betsy, and we was like, okay, we'll go through our list and see, not to recreate the police enforcement training they already do, but to go into prisons and do in-service, because they let you do with nurses and stuff, because we had to have a gentleman move to a medical facility. He didn't need to be here. He needed to have an ADA in place and a portal, things like that, to help them, because honestly, I didn't know a lot about the disease until I started working in it. So I think a lot of it is lack of education, and working in a lot of rural, from Harnett County area, they can't even really get to their primary doctor. So you think about coming to Duke, or you
Go to
would
the
see
primary doctor.
transportation. If they get transportation, that's a whole day for them. Because when they come to UNC, they're dropping 3 people off. It's just so many barriers. So even the gas card that helped the family drive from 3 hours away, like whatever we can do to get them in. And of course, the other visits could be telehealth, but I mean, you're right. If people don't know, it's kind of like we can't fault them if they don't know, but then that's our job, my job, to reach people who I feel like should know that may be working with that population. So what you said is very, very important.
Yep.
Rural health is tough.
Yes.
Rural health is tough to give.
Yes.
Rural health with a rare disease is
right.
Double it down.
Double.
Yep. Yeah, and something that's not, I'd say, not directly connected to this, but I think still relevant that HD Reach is going to be working on this year. We've already started an initiative around it. Long-term care and the facilities, like where can we find these facilities? How do we map that ecosystem so that we can provide navigation, right? Because often we're optimizing for that distance factor again, right? So like when my mother was in a long-term care facility, for example, she wasn't in the best long-term care facility. She was in the closest long-term care facility that would take her. And it's kind of a black hole. So we're starting this advocacy push where we're calling long-term care facilities across the entire state. We're trying to identify how they determine whether or not they'll take patients, whether or not they take HD patients or other neurodegenerative diseases. And we want to build a case that we can bring to the Capitol and push for advocacy. Now's the time to do that because we have this huge wave of people who are getting older. The baby boomers are getting older and they're going to need long-term care. So there's going to be a lot of attention. There's going to be a lot of investment in that type of model, and we can piggyback on that and kind of ride the wave. And the long-term care is exceedingly expensive, right?
Yes.
And you don't know how long somebody's going to be in long-term care. And it's a bit of the chicken and the egg, even with the HD care centers, right? Like you need to have the patient volume to justify the investment, but you can't get the investment without the patient volume. So how do you sort of bridge that gap, right? So, you know, I think if we can continue to map this ecosystem, again, going back to what I said earlier, this whole ecosystem is connected. Map it, figure out where there's connection points, and then start working together as a community to allocate those investment dollars more effectively. That's going to take us, you know, a lot further than what we're doing today.